So, thank you very much for coming. We're going to be talking about all these things, but first let's meet our panelists. So I'm going to start at the far end. Ndindi, if you're ready to go, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Ndindi Kitonga, and Scott Stubbe and myself run a small independent school called Angelus Workshop, where we do a lot of role-playing games and LARPs.
That's right.
I am Noah Sutton-Smolin. I have been LARPing up and down the West Coast and in New York for a number of years, about 8 years so far. And I was a student until about mid-June, and I'm entering the workforce pretty soon.
Hi everybody, my name is Emily. I work for CDC, which is not the Center of Disease Control. It's Child Development Centers. We're an after-school program that runs child-oriented growth. So we do social-emotional growth as well. I'm sure if some of you guys are parents, you guys might have heard of us. There's a lot of us in Southern California.
I'm Shawn Crosby. I've been LARPing since 1983. Kind of crazy. I used to work in educational software. If any of you guys ever played Math Blaster or Reading Blaster or any of that kind of thing, not only did I work on that, I was the voice of Math Blaster, which was kind of crazy. Currently, I'm working in the educational department at the USS Iowa Battleship, and just about everything I do with my life, very frequently in costume, involves educating kids in a roundabout way.
Thank you. And my name is Aaron Vanek. I actually wrote my bio out. I've been active with role-playing games for nearly 40 years. I've been LARPing for 30. This fall I will be teaching 3 classes at the Creative Learning Place in Los Angeles, which is a center for homeschoolers and non-traditional learning. The classes I'm teaching are analog game design, escape room design, and science through LARPing. This is my 4th year of teaching middle school level, 2nd year at the Creative Learning Place. I'm also the secretary and board member of the Game Academy, and I'll be talking about the Game Academy more. Game Academy is a Northern California 501c3 nonprofit that runs after-school enrichment and summer camps using role-playing games and LARPs. We have our 3rd week at camp right now up in Northern California. I've taught analog game design and introductory robotics to middle and junior high students for 3 years at the International Children's Academy, which is a private school in Beverly Hills. I've consulted with Texas State University to use LARPing techniques for their nurse training program. I created an escape room unit for freshmen at Allen Leroy Locke High School in South Los Angeles near Watts. And that worked really well. They've called me back to design a whole puzzle club for the students, an escape room for the students. And finally, I've created or co-created 15 educational live-action role-playing games for 4 different schools in the Los Angeles area. So that is us. We're very happy to be here. Thank you very much. And we will start talking about kind of an overview of live-action role-playing games, and social-emotional learning. Yay, more water. Thank you. I doesn't know I already have a bottle hidden here. More water. Okay. By the way, I just want to notice, if you guys are interested in this topic, there's other panels at Comic-Con that are going on. One tomorrow at 10, and another one Sunday at 11 on, again, the first one at 10, using graphic novels to cope with bullying, and then Geek Ed is doing one that's on Caring for the Nerd Mind. Both those are at the San Diego Central Library at the Shiloh Suite. So if you're interested in this topic at all, there's plenty of stuff to see here. I just wanted to mention those. So, what is social emotional learning? Here's a quick definition from CASEL, which is a collaborative, Collaborative Association for Social Emotional Learning. The process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And let's go into that more, because social emotional learning is a relatively new thing that's been coming out in addition to the STEM or the 4 Rs that people are becoming aware that it's important for students to know about their social emotional self. And I was really surprised. I had this Washington Post article from May, and and I clipped it, but I forgot that it's time to listen to Melania. Sort of surprising. But I wanted to read this because it's actually really important. It sort of explains the importance in the research that's being done on social emotional learning. So this is why social emotional learning is critical for education and should be an integrated part of it. And this was written by Timothy Shriver, who's the co-founder of CASTLE. He's also the co-chair of the Aspen Institute National Commission on Social Emotional Learning and Academic Development. So he writes, quote, "Social and emotional learning is an idea whose time has come. It builds from neuroscience. Builds from neuroscience that reveals that our brains are both malleable and dependent on the strength of our relationships. It involves teaching skills like self-awareness and problem solving, and then empowering young people to use those skills to focus on academic learning and supporting others. It calls for schools to engage families and, in particular, to end inequities and bring families and educators together to promote positive growth. Recent research suggests it works. In one study, social and emotional learning programs were shown to reduce behavior problems and increase test scores. In another, they were shown to improve physical and mental health outcomes with gains that persist up to 18 years, which is a pretty amazing sort of thing when you get a longitudinal thing, that if someone is grounded in social emotional learning and has tools and techniques for empathy and self-awareness, that the benefits last for almost 2 decades. In a third study, they were shown to deliver an 11-to-1 return on investment. The World Economic Forum recommends a focus on social and emotional learning skills for the workplace of the future. Overwhelming majorities of teachers, administrators, and parents report wanting more social and emotional learning in their schools. So this is something that is very common in a lot of schools and teaching environments are talking about social emotional learning. So it's very important for the whole person to get some of this. So, next, what is role-playing or role-playing games? This one should be pretty easy for a lot of people who are at Comic-Con, but I look at it as a communal oral storytelling, narration. The idea of a role-playing game, typically you're sitting around a table, playing a role, a character, in a certain situation. And the game aspect means that there are mechanics and rules for how you get things done. Here's a large collection of very popular role-playing games that you've probably heard of. Dungeons & Dragons, Vampires up there, GURPS, Pathfinder Mage. There's a lot of books, you can see a lot of these. So this is really common. Usually you see something like this, a group of people around a table. Now it's very interesting, they just have paper and a couple weird shaped dice, and they're collaboratively telling a story together, a narrative together. What I think important about this is, I don't see any laptops, I don't see any, I think there might be a phone there, but I'm not seeing digital things. People are face-to-face. You're dealing with other human beings. And that's really important for role-playing games and live-action role-playing games. LARP stands for live-action role-playing. It's very much like a tabletop role-playing game, but instead of narrating the action, so you sit around a table and you say, I do this, or my character does this, you actually do these actions. You're not narrating it, you do it. And it's not like moving your little avatar on a computer. Some examples of live-action role-playing games are the Model United Nations, mock trials, military war games, disaster preparedness, medical simulation training, Stanford Prison Experiment. But the last one I think is really important because it shows that kids are doing this all the time. Cops and Robbers and Tea Time and Playing House and things like that, that they're taking on a character and a role in a fictional setting. Kids are used to this. It's easy for them to get into it. And that's important when it comes to an educational setting. Here's an example of what you usually think of with live-action role-playing. People dress up in the forest, they hit each other with foam swords, but the realm of live-action role-playing encompasses all genres, ages, groups, duration. It's as varied as comic books or movies and TV and things like that. There's tons and tons of different things with live-action role-playing, but this is the most popular. Main thing I want to say is that these are not video games. There's another Washington Post article that I'm going to quote to you by Jean Twenge. She's a professor of psychology here at San Diego State University. She's the author of iGen, Why Today's Super-Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less rebellious, more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood. So in this article on kids and their digital connection, she writes, many people suspect that today's teens spend much more time with screens and much less time with their peers face-to-face than did earlier generations. And my analysis of numerous large surveys of teens of various ages shows this to be true. The number of 17 and 18-year-olds who got together with their friends every day, for example, dropped by more than 40% between 2000 and 2016. Teens are also sleeping less, with sleep deprivation spiking after 2010. If teens were doing well, this might be fine, but they're not. Clinical level depression, self-harm behavior, the number of suicide attempts, and the suicide rate for teens all rose sharply after 2010, when smartphones became common and the iPad was introduced. Teens who spend excessive amount of time online are more likely to be sleep deprived, unhappy, and depressed. So this shows that getting teens away from the computer all the time, even though you'll be talking to other people through chat and things like that, but actually getting that face-to-face time with humans is absolutely critically important. And again, role-playing games and LARPs do that. So what can role-playing games and LARPs teach? They can all teach us something about ourselves, about others, about society, and also facts about the world. So when I'm using live action role-playing, it's often for a topic, so history, science, math, literature, it's something like that. We're not going to talk about that. That was a panel I've done before, and I can talk about how LARPs and role-playing games do that specifically, but obviously we're talking about the social emotional learning end of stuff. This is one thing that I thought was really important. Now, which I mispronounced, this is in Danish. Østerskov Efterskole is a high school in Denmark, and their entire program is LARP-based or role-playing game-based, all of it. All the students, all the time, every day, are somehow involved in a LARP or role-playing game. It's 7 years old now, I think. 7 years old. And I talked to the headmaster, the co-founder, Mads Lunau, and he said, students can safely learn failures by wearing the mask of role-playing without getting hurt. And what I think was important to think about this in hurt is that you can try these things out in a role-playing situation. You have the mask, call it alibi in LARPing, that you can make these mistakes where you personally are not going to be injured because of this, your character is. And that's a very powerful tool for learning. The fact that you can make a mistake and you're not marked down, it's not your grade, because it's your character that's failing, not you. And that's one of the important tools of this, that you can try things, you can experiment, you can see what happens again. And it's not going on your permanent record for grade, because it's the character that failed. I'm going to go through these really quickly. A bunch of features of educational and role-playing games and LARPs, context-rich learning, you get quick feedback. It's multidisciplinary. That's what I've noticed when I was designing stuff. It's actually difficult for me to isolate one subject when I'm designing something like just math or just science. History, literature, art, it all comes in. It's so involved. Social emotional learning always comes in this because you're collaborating with other people. Empathy, metacognitive development, which is thinking about the game itself. So you're thinking in the game, but also kind of looking back at it on a meta level. The big thing that's using a lot is the 21st century skills. That's buzzwords in education right now. And you have intrinsic motivation, intrinsic rewards that are aligned with learning objectives and desired values, and you can align all these to standards, Common Core, Next Gen, IST, all that stuff. A couple examples, real quick from the Game Academy. This is an example of the after-school enrichment program that the Game Academy does. Two players created characters that enjoy playing pranks. Upon playing a prank after a particularly dangerous encounter, a terrified NPC, which is a non-player character, so that's someone that the players aren't playing, but the teacher is, runs off into the night to hide. The group searches, but does not find her until the next day when they discover that enemies from a nearby camp have taken her prisoner. At this point, the story veers from the main plot line into planning and executing a rescue. After the rescue is complete, the two prankster players, unprompted and of their own accord, issue sincere apologies in roleplay, promising to be more aware of the timing of their antics. So you have these two students to kind of realize the problem playing pranks on people, that it can have a problem, and they apologize to a fictional character out of it. This one I'm going to go through quickly because I know this is basically using 19th and early 20th century Middle East explorations that the players were caught amidst a conflict and they had to make a choice like how to handle religious difficulties and things like that. The last one, which I've actually referred to, this was from Chula Vista nearby, Dr. Alec Patton. His students designed a Syrian refugee simulation in 2016. And this was student created and student run. So the participants, which are like parents and teachers and the community of the school, took on the roles of Syrian citizens forced to leave and seek refuge in another country, and they had to go through what would happen. And the students did all this research from actual genuine Syrian refugees. They were reading first-person accounts and based the actions that happened in the simulation on what really happened to real people. So in general, there's a huge potential for role-playing games and social-emotional learning to have a great effect on people at any level, not just students, but adults as well. The World Economic Forum at Davos has a recurring thing called the Day in the Life of a Refugee, run by Crossroads, where the head of the UN Council actually sees what it's like to be a refugee as they go through this simulation. So here's a little plug for the Game Academy. You can reach us at thegameacademy.org. We're empowering learners to achieve this all the time. So that is a very quick overview, and hopefully I made it okay, way too late. Yeah, sorry guys. Okay, we will next go to Emily, has a question for the panel.
So I'm sure some of you guys in the audience probably have doubts, like how does this work? There's a lot of people who say this kind of pedagogy doesn't work. What do you say to somebody who insists that traditional schooling works better, and especially in the educational aspect? And I guess this question's most prevalent for you guys because you guys have that school. You have your school.
Did you want to take that? Yeah.
Well, what I would say is, first of all, that social learning, the affective and cognitive are very closely linked to each other. So social learning and academic learning need to be very closely linked to each other. So one of the games, and when we load it up, you'll get an opportunity to see, is having simulations and role-playing games and LARPs are great opportunities for students who would not fit very well in a traditional environment. Like, let's say if you have ADHD, or you can't concentrate, or you're gifted in certain ways, for you to still be part of the learning community that is in the classroom. So that's a great opportunity for that word, which in education circles we talk about all the time. You have to differentiate it for everybody. You have to make it personalized, and games make it that. They make it that you can have that opportunity.
No, it's okay.
Someone else want to go?
Sure. I think the closest answer I can give to this question is that even in the context of traditional schooling, having the backing of a community is a critically important part of being able to focus on education. And in the absence of a sense of community, it becomes very difficult to learn effectively. I think probably the most significant impact of LARP that, besides outside of LARP that is specifically designed to be pedagogical, the most significant impact is going to be that LARPing connects you on a deep emotional level with a group of people who are willing to be intellectual and narrative collaborators with you, and that has a huge impact on one's ability to focus and to care about educational work.
I very frequently work outside of a typical educational environment, and I'll very often work with 500 or 1,000 kids at one time, which is really kind of interesting. When I get to approach these kids, they're already in school, they're already pursuing a course of education, and by the time they get to me, many of them who are underprivileged and come from very varied backgrounds, they're very bored with school. And the thing that I offer them when I show up at an event as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I get to talk to them about the science of Star Wars, the technology of Star Wars, how the Force might work and things like that, and then corroborate that with education and how it works within their life, I get to see over an 8 or 10 year span by doing these events, how it actually lights a fire in these kids. And so me going in as Obi-Wan Kenobi and saying, okay, if you follow these things, if you take them to heart, if you alter the way you approach your education, you will find a way to be a Jedi. Now, it's very fantastic, and it doesn't sound very realistic, But the thing that I get back from kids, and this can be kids in Compton, this can be kids, underprivileged kids in Houston, wherever I'm going to do this, they will come back to me and they will bring me report cards, and they will bring me their yellow and blue and black belts. They will bring me the things that have lit a fire under their butts to study and to have a focus, and almost all of them, their grades go up. And it's amazing when a mother shows me a kid's report card and he's got an A and he's got 4 Bs. And I'm like, this is terrific. And I'm talking to the kid and like, oh, obviously you're studying very hard. This is tremendous. And the mom goes, no, you don't get it. That was a C and 4 Ds when we saw you last year. And it really does. And you really have the opportunity to take this kind of an environment and through play, be able to engage kids in such a manner that they take the initiative themselves because they like the goal that you're presenting to them. And it's really kind of fascinating to see how well this works.
Yeah, the basic thing that I'm looking at is that in tradition, all students learn at different rates, at different levels, that there's different types of learning, and a lot of times traditional learning of a lecture may not be appropriate for certain subjects, for certain students, for certain times in their students' life. So it changes, and this is essentially the way I look at it. Role-playing games and LARPs is a different tool that's added to a toolbox that can engage students that normally won't be, because it harnesses the power of emotion and narrative, what's called intrinsic motivation. So you are doing something because you want to solve the mystery. I designed one where students played police officers and forensic specialists trying to solve a murder. And they want to know who did it, they want to know what happened. So that's why they're researching chemistry, and that's why they're doing it, because they want to know what happens, not because the teacher told them, here today you have to learn chemistry. Well, why is this important? Because you have to get a grade, and you have to get a grade. That's an abstract thing. Give them a concrete, so to speak, narrative. And I think it works really well. So thank you, Emily.
In my experience in LARPing, and this is a long-standing pattern that I've noticed among every single group that I have played games with, LARPs tends to be a magnet for queer and neurodivergent people, and it's very unclear to me exactly why this might be. I have ideas as to what it could be, but it's clear that LARP is doing something to help queer communities and particularly queer youth, and it's organically drawing them to this singular source of narrative role playing. My question that I want to ask the rest of you is, what is that thing? What is LARP doing that draws queer communities together, and what can be intentionally done to play into that and improve its efficacy for queer youth?
You guys got something too?
No, absolutely.
Okay. I think LARPs in general, and also the role-playing game thing in general, attracts communities because you're repeating, because it's an ongoing story that continues. You're seeing the repeat group coming together, and the goal of the group is to tell a good story or something like that. So it's kind of separate from the people themselves. So you have like a common goal that kind of overrides other sort of situations. And also the idea of being able to play a role is absolutely amazing. Play a different role. You can try on different things, different genders, different ethnicities, different things like that. You can explore your own identity in a safe space a lot of times. And I think that's extremely attractive to people who normally are marginalized and not allowed to do things like that. And they're accepted for who their character is that they're playing, because it's your character that's doing it. So I think that's a really powerful ability. Thank you. Do you guys?
I think identity is definitely tied to that, and I'd like to answer it anecdotally and talk about two of my students who are trans and some of the choices that they made with their characters and such. The first one, who was already out as trans. And they made the obvious choice of just playing as the quote-unquote opposite sex or the opposite gender assigned sex. And so just by being able to choose, do I want to play an elf? Do I want to play a dwarf? Oh, do I want to play a cis male? Do I want to play, etc.? Just built into RPGs already is this kind of mechanic for being able to explore who you are. And the second one I'd like to talk about is a student who was not yet out. She came out to me as trans some years after we played. But she was expressing as male at the time, played a Pygmalion-like character in our ancient Greek role-playing game, who was cis male, apparently, but was creating the ideal female statue. And that process was so telling. And so I'll let you draw your own conclusions on what purpose that might have served my student, but I think it's pretty telling.
Okay. One of the things that I find rather interesting is when we do some of the events that involve the parents and get the parents involved. And when the kids choose a character and the parents choose a character, I've seen a lot of really interesting discussions come out that you wouldn't normally have expected. And especially when I do something that's in an area where they are perceived to be very uptight, like when I go to Texas and I meet a lot of people who are like, "Roar, Texas." And then I meet some kids who really use the opportunity to talk to their parents about things that are very heartfelt. And when some of these kids approach their parents and begin to intimate that, you know, they have a different gender identity, it's interesting to see the parents accept that because they're role-playing and continue a conversation that a few minutes before we started everything, the parents, you know, were telling me how, you know, raw, tough, cool, I've got guns in my truck outside in the parking lot. And then they get really accepted about that. And it's neat to be able to use this kind of environment to do that and to get the kids to actually let loose a bit, whereas normally they wouldn't dare approach their parents in any other way. But because this is play, because it you know, it's not the real environment, they can roll it back. But if they get a positive from their parents, they can roll it forward and continue. And I've had some parents come up to me going, I had no idea that about my kids. And it's weird and it's strange and it'll be good. I'm good. And that like breaks your heart. You're just like, wow, how did that happen? And the fact that they really can identify through this kind of an environment where they never would have had that conversation before is sort of mind-blowing.
I think there's actually two parts to that. For one part, I think a lot of it is escapism. I know that's what I did as a kid. I don't, as an adult, like watching dramas or political shows because that stuff's happening all in real life. I like to watch comedy shows because that's how I cope with things. I see situations, I laugh, I smile. And I know when I was a kid, I didn't like me. I wanted to be Sailor Moon. Like, I didn't want to be me. So I think that's part of it is just I get to be somebody who I know I can be and somebody who is better than myself. And that's a big confidence boost. But I think the other part of it is, as sad as it is, a lot of neurodivergent and a lot of queer people, they're not quite accepted into their environment. And I think, like even now there were protesters outside, you know, there's stuff going on even in California. And I think being a human in a role-playing game, especially in something like Dungeons and Dragons, where you can be an elf, you can be a gnome, being a human is one of like the most boring things you can be. And so I think that if you have all the aspects of yourself, you know, I'm a human female who's, you know, I might be neurodivergent, I might be queer, and they're like, that's it? Like that's your quirk? And I think that having it not be a big deal in a fantasy setting is it's a relief. That's how I would feel it.
Thank you. Shawn, can you give a quick presentation? Because Scott didn't.
Yeah, we'll kind of blow through this. So I'm kind of like the weird mavericky guy here.
Can you guys see this okay, or should we get the lights down? You guys okay? Yeah. Okay.
It's not a big deal. It's mostly just pictures kind of kicking around. So I taught high school very early in my career, and it kind of helped give me a concept of what everything was, was happening with kids, and how much of a kid I still was and needed to learn. And it really sort of colored everything that I do with my life these days. Almost everything has some sort of play bent to it. Almost everything has a charity bent to it. And everything has an interactive bent to it, largely because everything I do with charity involves some sort of character. And sometimes it's Indiana Jones, sometimes it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, sometimes it's a steampunk character, something of my own creation. But that's the way I've found, personally, to reach kids. My presentation here, I'm going to kind of blow through. I deal with a lot of adults too, and we do some interesting stuff. Like we've got this Costumers Guild West group that does a lot of historical costuming and whatnot. And I find that a lot of the adults sort of respond in the same way that the kids do. And when we do events with the adults, it's also a learning opportunity, and I get the same kind of feedback I get from kids, up to and including the ways that they play a character that they hadn't normally considered playing, and that their social interactions change very, very much with the way that we work. So we have this Costumers Guild West group, and we have Costume College, which is next weekend. So we're going to be zombies when we run this thing next weekend. And it's a thing that teaches people how to make costumes and how to deal with various time periods of history and things like that. So all of this, the Harry Potter picture you see in the corner, that was just a social event that we did just kind of for fun. Everybody made their costumes. We went out to see the movies, and everybody played a character as we went to do it. We do historical tours of Disneyland in 1955. So everything that you get from 1955 is the way Disneyland used to be, and we'll teach history that way. But a lot of these people who come to these, we're all from different walks of life. And they're all different identity backgrounds and things, but they're all there to learn. And a lot of people that I meet in social situations we don't get along with at all suddenly find ways to get along with everybody in this, because they want to participate, they want to be part of it, they're learning what's going on. And so I do a lot of stuff with libraries. I'm a 501st Stormtrooper, really, and I, Obi-Wan with Yoda. Yoda's sort of one of my main teaching tools, because Yoda gets away with stuff that I never could as a human being, which is really great. And so most of the time as Obi-Wan Kenobi, I've got to be the rather straight man to him, and Master Yoda always in trouble, you see. But he can teach a lot of lessons that I can't, which is really very fun. And the kids really buy into that because they have bought into the idea that they can potentially be a Jedi. In my case, this is Space Center Houston, and I'll teach an audience of about 1,000 people, and we'll talk about everything. We'll talk about science. We will talk about anti-bullying. We will talk about how to get by in the world as an individual. It depends what they want to focus on, what they want to cover. And I've done it all, and I've done it for 10 or 11 years. And as we do these Jedi boot camps, we get to impart these lessons to kids that they're not learning in their schools. They're not learning from their parents, but they need to know to survive in life. And this isn't something that I initially set out to do. This is something that I became over time. And so I wander around the countryside in this vehicle, in this costume, and try to be the teacher that a Jedi would be. And so I'll get 500 kids with lightsabers. We'll teach them how to be good people. We will teach them honorable combat. Then we will fight each other with this and teach how not to bully when you're doing it, how to get along with people that you disagree with, all of these different things. Some of it, we're teaching kids how to deal with cancer they have, how to deal with the leukemia or the AIDS that they have. These lessons that they don't get, because a lot of them are in hospitals, and the parents come in and go, you're sick, Billy, I'm so sorry. And nobody says, okay, Billy, this is how we're going to make your life better. And we get to work with the kids and teach them how to do that, teach them how to fight it, how to be a survivor, and not just to be a victim. And it's the weirdest thing. And we use LARP to do it. We can use Harry Potter to teach STEM. We take over an entire library. This was an event Aaron and I did. And the kids came in, they got sorted, they got report cards, they went and they took classes. It was parent day, so the parents got to be involved in the classes. We awarded the house cup at the end of the day. Everybody got points from their various houses. And we taught the kids all of the object lessons that they needed to have that a lot of them just did not have. So anyway, there's a lot of neat stuff that I've been able to do. We've done a lot of library events and stuff, which is great. We can use these kind of things to be the teachers that the kids just can't get in schools. The teachers that I work with, they don't have money for paper or pencils or anything like that, and they're too busy trying to save their jobs and dealing with 40 to 50 member classes to deal with teaching kids how to deal with life. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do with LARP and with immersive learning and with inventive learning. Teach them how to deal with life and how to be people, and not just students. I didn't sign up for it, but that's what I do.
Yay. Thank you, Shawn. Scott, Ndindi, I know I shortchanged you very much, thank you, but go ahead through it. If we are, go do your time, and then we can always take questions outside too, because I want to make sure we get these people out.
Great, okay, so you gave us a great transition there, Shawn, because we are lucky enough to be the teachers, did you say the teachers that you couldn't be, what the teacher couldn't be.
Right.
We were lucky enough to found our own school so that we could be those types of teachers. So we kind of totally went rogue with our school, Angelus Workshop School. Yeah, you're going to see the kids playing here. These are a bunch of the different games that we play. And so we founded our own revolutionary independent school in West Los Angeles called Angelus Workshop School for grades 6 through 12. And we heavily incorporate role-playing, LARPing, creative play into our everyday curriculum with an aim towards greater self-knowing, social justice, and joy, which is, as you guys said, is vital to learning. It's a CSI simulation there, I think. She's not really dead. So Ndindi wants to talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about character building and how character building is character building. Get the pun? Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
My soul physically goes.
So we did have a couple of points we wanted to discuss today, but we don't want to belabor already what's been said, and also I think your questions might be more important than what it is we want to talk about. So the notion that character building, creating your character in a simulation or a game, is important to building your own personal character is very important and a very vital part of our school. So empathy development and learning how to be in somebody else's shoes is extremely important from a developmental standpoint. And that's something that we put a lot of our energies in when kids are younger. You know, share your cookies with so-and-so and do this thing at the swings. But then we somewhat give up when people reach the middle school and high school ages, where your brain is still developing until you're 24. So that the idea that you need to be in collaboration and community with other people and keep developing empathy is very important for your own development. And so when kids develop their characters, what we seek to do, because we have the freedom to do it, is beyond learning about World War II, you get to be a character and follow through and make decisions as this person and get to experience what that looks like. And that developmentally is very important for you.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, you have to work together, right? So you're on the Millennium Falcon, and you know, you're the 12th grader and you're the pilot and you want to fly the Millennium Falcon, and sitting next to you is this 6th grader who annoys you all the time, but he's the astromech droid and suddenly the hyperdrive goes out. Guess what? You're going to get along with this 6th grader. You know, you're going to work it out together. So it's really a great, like you guys were saying, it's kind of a simulation for social situations, right? Where you can then kind of bond in a way that's safer, right? We also wanted to talk a little bit about something you guys have been talking about a lot, learning differences, giftedness, social cues. Role-playing is a great, like, systematized and safe simulation of social interaction, but it also really is social interaction at the same time. So it's like you can reap the rewards without the challenges or the risks being so high socially, which is really great. Students on the spectrum who often struggle with social cues and norms love the fact that there's a system. Oh my gosh, she just cast charm person on me, right? Like, what's that really mean? You get it, right? Also, role-playing games by nature are open-ended content, and this is really good for gifted kids, because if you're a gifted kid yourself, or you know one, you know that spoon-feeding information to them in a very linear way is just freaking boring. And so you want to learn three-dimensionally, right? And what is role-playing game except for role-playing game except for something three-dimensional? It's not Candyland here. It's not like move forward on the path, success. It's go wherever you want to, right? So that's why one of the reasons I think why role-playing games also really attract non-neurotypical kids. You know, Sam.
I guess so. I think for students who might find themselves on that ADHD, or folks with, I guess, issues with concentration, some of the role-playing games, and I didn't even know that Aaron ran one, but I do the CSI. I'm kind of the math and science person of our operation. So I do that CSI math component, and there are so many topics that we cover. There's critical thinking, there's reading comprehension, there's understanding the law, there is the scientific method, and if you're a kid who has struggles with just kind of sitting in your seat, or you don't have certain skills, I can find an assignment for you within our learning community of this thing that we're trying to solve, right? So the kid who wants to do the blood spatter is different from the kid who never wants to get dirty, but they're all there. And the kid who's just like, I just want to know all about Jack the Ripper, and I'm going to follow that, and I'm going to tell everybody every time about this horror, right? Like, so it creates that community where I can have one crime for the entire year, and it is completely limitless. I can explore everything from soil underneath people's feet to, the story is just the layer for the academic content that I need to cover for the school year. And so that's great for kids with all sorts of differences.
Mm-hmm. And connecting that back to Emily's question, well, how is this teaching? Isn't there a test at the end? Well, there's standard traditional assessments, and then there's alternative assessments, right? And alternative assessments are often more authentic, right? Most of us every day, we are taking alternative assessments, How am I going to actually get to Comic-Con today? How am I going to actually get to that panel? How am I going to do my job, right? So alternative assessments, authentic assessments are what happens in LARPs and role-playing games all the time. How do I slay the dragon? Whatever it is. So that's kind of a really great way to learn, right? The last thing we wanted to talk about, I think, is so we've talked about social learning, but we haven't talked about the macro, the greater society. So social learning is also socio-political learning. As we talk about social learning, you need to think not only of a small group of peers, but also a greater society. And so RPGs, with their built-in speculative worlds, they almost all have that, they create a perfect filter through which we can see a larger society and learn about it, critically analyze it, find a role in it, in its dynamics of both power and love. How do we conflict and how do we collaborate? So you'll see like this one right here. This is an RPG, a tabletop RPG I made up called Stranger in Town, and it's a Cold War paranoia type role-playing game. I think Frankenstein was going to high school right there. And it's a satirical Cold War kind of paranoia game. It's kind of like Rod Serling meets Matt Groening, I guess the best way to put it. You know what I'm saying? So like, oh, I get it, okay. And the kids can explore the American mass psychology that was going on during the Cold War in a really fun way. It's also game masterless. So somebody plays, you know, the alien from the day the Earth stood still, who comes in as a messianic figure and tries to convince everybody to do right, and the other people are playing all the crazy people that are, you know, following the mob mentality. So it's, you know, it's really a great, role-playing games can be really a great way to explore larger social movements, larger social conflicts, and developments as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would conclude by saying that certainly for Scott and myself, education is not neutral, and so understanding your socio-political agency in the world is extremely important. There is a game, and I don't know when it will come up, which is Bloodwater that we created together. It is a game set in the Old West, and you have different parts of town. There's the Chinese part of town, the black part of town. You know, you have the ruling class, you have Native Americans, and all of these actors. And really the questions kids are asking themselves here are, who has power? Who says so? What do the marginalized folks do? How do you get political agency? And for the most part, I think we've run the simulation 4 or 5 times. Everyone is always trying to rise above their social class or the limits that are set upon them based on the mechanics of the game. And everyone is always making decisions that make their lives better in the same way that we do in society. And for the most part, kids replicate the society that was the Old West in the Old West times, right? Like, you know, when now that you cannot be buried in the good part of town because you are this particular race or you have this particular part in society, you act in certain ways. And even crimes of opportunity, like it's really interesting when you match what kids do in the simulation. And so it helps kids, again, have empathy for this is how folks act when they're trying to like figure out their place in society.
We could be here all night, but I know they don't want us to. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stop, but we are going to wait outside. So please give us your questions there. I know we have a lot of contact information and things like that. I apologize that we went a little too long, but thank you very much for staying late. We are going to be right outside to take any of your questions or comments or things like that. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good night. Have a wonderful rest of your Comic-Con.
Come talk to us right out there.